You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Do you like your history haunted? Then you'll love Macabre London, a podcast hosted by me, Nikki Drees. Every fortnight we uncover one of the forgotten stories of London's bloody past and get to the bottom of some more well-known gruesome tales. We've covered witchcraft in the form of the last witch trial held in World War II, found out what it was like to be a hangman in the Victorian times, and even dipped our toe into the paranormal by uncovering what really happened at the infamous Enfield haunting. So if you're interested in learning the gory, spooky and eerie history of the UK's capital city, then check out the show. You can find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Acast and all other podcast providers by searching for Macabre London. That's MACABRE London.
Hi, I'm Johanna from Vienna, Austria.
And I'm Annie from Boston, Massachusetts, and we're so happy that you decided to tune in for yet another episode of our little international true crime podcast. You just heard the promo for Macabre London, which sounds pretty amazing.
Yes, please go and check them out. Herzlich willkommen to all of our first-time listeners, and schön, dass ihr wieder da seid for our Hellions out there. I'm not gonna say what it means.
And I'm not gonna try to repeat it.
So, usually we do murder, mystery and the macabre, so lots of true crime involving dead or missing people, as well as just other horrendous things that could easily kill you, like in our first Victorian Death Trip episode. But I figured this week I would love to tell you about a completely different kind of crime. One we never covered before, actually. Art theft.
Oh, is it a heist? It's the first for us.
Well, let's wait for the end of the story and then you and you listeners out there decide if it deserves to be called a heist.
A common robbery, then. Ooh, still a first. I'm here for
That's
it.
true, yeah. Now, I say let's just dive into the story today, right?
Yeah.
There are absolutely no warnings for this one, I'd say.
Sounds good.
You ready, Annie?
I'm ready.
Now, as any other metropolis, Vienna is full of all different kinds of museums. One that I mentioned a couple of times already in our episodes is the Kriminalmuseum, where you can learn everything you need to know about Viennese and Austrian criminal history. But we have also a chocolate museum. Fun fact, the nowadays boss of the Heindl chocolate factory that also runs the museum used to be a colleague of mine when I was working for Lauda Air. Lovely young woman, and they make amazing chocolate, especially the Maroni Herzen, which are like chestnut cream hearts, and they are only available seasonal. Let's see, what else do we have? A funeral museum, because in Vienna we admire what is referred to as a schöne Leich. The literal translation would be a beautiful corpse, but what it means is a beautiful funeral and everything that comes with it. The Viennese relationship with death is indeed very unique, and a lot of folklore spun around it over the centuries.
I love it. We have so much to visit when we're finally able to visit.
So much to do.
Yeah. We'll be there more than once. Don't worry. There'll be a few trips, I'm sure.
Perfect. Another curious museum we have in Vienna is the Museum of Contraception and Abortion. Shocking.
Shocking.
No, it's of course a very, very informative museum that tells you all about the history of contraception, the different techniques, and about abortion.
That's also very interesting.
And of course, I want to mention once more the Torture Museum that shows you all the creative ways people were and unfortunately are still tortured nowadays. Another museum I personally can highly recommend is the Jewish Museum, which tells the story of the Jewish people in Vienna from the Middle Ages, when Vienna was home of one of the biggest Jewish communities, all the way to the horrors of the Holocaust. And when you walk through the city with open eyes, you will not only find the so-called Stolpersteine, which is an art project by Gunter Demnig that commemorates all the victims of the National Socialism, but also you will see plaques on many houses that tell you the stories of Jewish people who used to live there and were deported to one of the concentration camps.
Oh, that's amazing and heartbreaking and just incredibly sad. And just so there isn't any confusion for our American listeners, what we in America know of as the far right-wing Nazi Party was called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Just to be clear, though, Hitler and the Nazis, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, was the exact opposite of the democratic socialism that most European countries, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, most of the Middle East, Asia, Canada, so on and so forth, have. The Nazis were nationalists, but not socialists. There are a lot of people in this country who will say things like basic health care or affordable education. It's a Nazi ideal. We don't want anyone to think that it's remotely comparable because, in Hitler's eyes, social equality was only for those who met his batshit crazy version of perfection, and we know how the rest of that went, right? So, yeah. Let's get back to the museums.
We also have the more classic museums that hold masterpieces of art from all different eras and all different countries. In total, Vienna has over 100 museums, I think. And I mentioned it in one of our early episodes. For people who receive social welfare, the entrance to most of the museums is free for them and their children, which I find so amazing and important, especially as it helps children of families who are in some difficult financial situations. But there is one night in Vienna, and actually nowadays all over Austria, when everybody can visit the museums for the price of just one ticket, and that's 15 euros, and it's called the Lange Nacht der Museen. I personally only went twice because the sheer amount of people who attend gives me anxiety. I prefer to visit one museum at a time and take however long I like to look at all the things. Last year alone, a total of 389,000 people visited the participating museums all over Austria. Most visitors were counted, of course, in Vienna with 189,000 people. The most beloved one with 16,500 visitors was the Albertina Museum, a museum in the first district that has amazing exhibitions every year. For example, in 2018, they had Claude Monet or Keith Haring. 2017, it was Raphael, and 2016 was Van Gogh and Chagall.
Oh, nice.
And so on. You get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I can highly recommend the Albertina if you want to visit. And if you want to visit during the Lange Nacht der Museen, this year it is scheduled to take place on 3rd of October from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. if it's not cancelled. Have fun. Enjoy.
Yeah, I think I'll give that one a pass. I'm with you. I don't love crowds. I'll eat ramen for a few months in order to pay extra to avoid crowds, if that's an option. I'll literally do anything to avoid it. They're also a nightmare to navigate if you're pushing a wheelchair or in a wheelchair. It's just, if you're in a wheelchair, you're just staring at stranger tushies all day. It's like the view almost never changes. And you would think that people would shift a little bit so they can see, but they don't. So yes, I would like to see all of these museums, but not on the... Does it translate to the long night of museums?
Yeah, exactly.
I love
Long
it.
night of museums. Yeah.
I'm going to get better and better at just guessing what things mean.
Yeah. My second favorite museum in Vienna also participates, the Kunsthistorische Museum. That's the Museum of History of Art.
Oh, but that's your second favorite? What's your first? Is it the Criminal Museum? Is it the funeral? Is it the chocolate? The funeral? Chocolate Funeral Museum.
That would be cool.
I want a chocolate funeral.
No, my favorite is the Military Museum.
Oh, I knew that. My dad would like that museum a lot too, I think.
Yeah.
I definitely, I get my love of museums from my dad, and my love of museum gift shops, that was straight from my mom. So that is the museum where you can see the car from the Franz Ferdinand assassination in Sarajevo, right? With the blood-stained uniform?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And the coat that was worn by Napoleon when he was sent to his first place of exile on Elba.
Oh. Is it behind glass? Have you ever gotten close enough to sniff it?
But I was that close. And he was not that tiny, that was all just propaganda.
I do know that, yes.
This story today is not about the Military Museum. It is indeed about my second favorite museum, the Kunsthistorische Museum. And if you haven't turned off by now, thanks. But we still have a few more minutes before we dive completely into our case. You know how it is here at Fresh Hell. I want to give you at least a bit of background information on the museum.
Yeah, please do. I love it. When I visit you, we're going to have to make little YouTube videos and upload them.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Especially at the Kriminalmuseum.
Yes.
So back in our episode 43 about the murder of 11-year-old Dagmar Furich, I talked a little bit about the Viennese Ringstrasse, which was built around the inner city district right where the city wall was located. You remember, Annie?
I do.
So I told you lots of important and famous buildings are located on that street. If you want to learn more about the Ringstrasse, I recommend episode 43 or the book Viennese Ringstrasse published by Alfred Fogarassi. I only want to talk about one of the buildings on the Ringstrasse today, and that's the Kunsthistorische Museum. When the emperor decided in 1857 to have the impressive and very representative Ringstrasse built, he also wanted to have a new building for the imperial art collection. However, it would take another 10 years before the planning of the museum could even start. The architect Karl Freiherr von Hasenauer was chosen to design the building, but the star architect Gottfried Semper was chosen to refine the plans and support Hasenauer. I'm not sure if you know Gottfried Semper is, I think his most famous building must be the Opera House in Dresden, the so-called Semper Opera.
Yes, I do know that building.
Beautiful.
Yes, absolutely stunning.
So the construction started in 1871 and the opening was only a short 20 years later in 1891. The Kunsthistorische Museum is facing its twin building, the Museum of Natural History, and in between them stands a statue of Maria Theresia.
That sounds lovely. She was the empress who liked to marry off her many children instead of fighting wars, right? Smart. We like her.
Yeah, that's the one. One of her daughters was Marie Antoinette.
That's right.
Now, I want to read to you the description of the exterior taken from the webpage of the museum itself. Quote, work on the museums commenced in 1871 and 20 years later, in 1891, they were formally opened to the public. Semper had moderated Hasenauer's original designs for the facades, and they now feature a complex art historical program of sculptures and reliefs. The building's internal structure combines two architectural traditions. Entrance hall, staircase, and cupola hall form a dramatic unit that celebrates the imperial patron and his predecessors. An additional elegant feature is the circular opening in the ceiling of the entrance hall that offers visitors their first glimpse of the cupola hall. Ascending the stairs, visitors pass Antonio Canova's Theseus slaying the centaur. On their way to the cupola hall, the apex of imperial display. Along the central axis, a wealth of neo-Baroque decorations create one of the most solemn and splendid interiors of late 19th century Vienna, probably unrivaled in any other European museum. End quote.
Now we have to go to there.
Yeah, we do. So the collection there includes mostly art from the 16th and 17th centuries. Some of the most notable paintings that you can see there are the Madonna in the Meadows by Raphael, which is my favorite there. The Infanta painting by Velázquez, the Tower of Babel by Bruegel. But there are many paintings by Rubens, Tizian, Tintoretto, Dürer, Kranich, you know.
All the big ones.
All the big ones, yeah. I recommend you go visit as early as possible and during the week, not on a public holiday. Not during school holidays. Well, maybe. Depends. Vienna can be pretty empty during school holidays, interestingly enough. It's lovely.
Sounds good.
And if you choose to visit on a Wednesday from October to June, you can then walk over to the twin building of the Natural History Museum and have a wonderful dinner there in the big cupola hall.
Oh, that does actually sound really fun, and I think we would be there during that time.
Okay. Now you finally made it to the main part of today's story. The reason why we are all here, the theft of the Saliera.
Okay, what's the Saliera?
In short, it's just a freaking expensive salt bowl. I think in English it's called the Cellini salt cellar.
Oh, I have a fancy little pewter salt bowl. It's in the shape of a shell with a tiny little spoon. I got it on sale 15 years ago. I have used it thrice, but I'm guessing this is something of a somewhat more grand design.
You're guessing correctly. So the Renaissance-style gold table sculpture was made by the Italian goldsmith Benvenuto Cellini from 1540 to 1543 and was made for the French King François I, and it's the only surviving goldsmith work of Cellini.
Okay, that sounds terrifyingly fancy. There's like happy fancy, which is like tea at the Ritz, do you know what I mean? And then there's like terrifying fancy, which is when your date invites you to a cookout, but it's a catered affair at a famous politician's summer house, and you're not really sure which fork is which, and you just want to hide and smoke weed with the catering staff. That's scary fancy. This sounds like another step above that.
Did that ever happen to you?
No, why would you think that? No, it might have allegedly happened to me on one or two occasions, but this sounds like a step above that. This sounds like, yeah, so fancy.
No, I'm not as good as any with describing pieces of art, especially in any other language than my mother language, I have to admit, so I will fall back on the description of the Saliera from Wikipedia for you to paint a picture in your head, and it's based on Cellini's own description of the Saliera, yeah?
Okay.
Quote, "The Cellar is the only remaining work of precious metal which can be reliably attributed to Cellini. It was created in the Manierist style of the late Renaissance and allegorically portrays terra e mare, so land and sea. In Cellini's description, the sea was represented by a male figure reclining beside a ship for holding the salt. The earth he fashioned like a woman and placed a temple near her to serve as a receptacle for pepper. The salt cellar is made of ivory, rolled gold, and vitreous enamel. The gold is not cast in a mold but hammered by hand into its delicate shape. It stands about 26 centimeters tall. The base is about 33.5 centimeters wide and features bearings to roll it around."
Wow.
So that's almost a foot tall and a little over a foot wide. The thing is big, huge, golden, intricate, and heavy. And it's extremely valuable, as it is the last of its kind by Cellini and therefore freaking expensive. Its value is estimated with 50 to 58 million euros.
Oh, that is substantially more than what I paid for mine. I'm not gonna lie, that is quite a bit more. You could really buy a lot of salt with that.
I'm guessing you can buy a couple of salt mines with that. Yeah, it's not too shabby, but who was the creator of this precious salt shaker? Who was Benvenuto Cellini? Have you heard of him before, Annie?
I know the name. I feel like there's something of his I know, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but maybe not, because I definitely didn't know anything about this salt cellar. I feel like I would have known that.
Well, he was actually pretty forgotten up until the 19th century when his art was rediscovered. But honestly, I think we could do a whole episode about this man because his life fits right into our preferred theme. He was not only a genius and a perfect example for a Renaissance man, but also allegedly a thief and a murderer.
Oh, he sounds fun.
He was born on 5th of November 1500 in Florence, as son of the musician and builder Giovanni Cellini and his wife Maria Elisabetta. The father was working as architect for the family Medici, but his passion was music. He not only played and composed, he also built instruments. These people in the Renaissance were just like amazing, right?
It's amazing.
They did everything.
Can you imagine what we'd accomplish during this pandemic if we didn't have Wi-Fi or Netflix or television?
No, we wouldn't have accomplished anything. Let's be honest.
Well, that's probably fair. I certainly haven't.
So the father wanted Benvenuto to become a musician, but the son preferred to learn the trade of a goldsmith instead. Already in his teenage years, he was rather, let's call it notorious. So he once was involved in some form of physical fight when he was only 16 years old, which led to his banishment from Florence.
You feel like you have to really get things wrong to have a whole city say no thank you.
Thank God the family Cellini had such great connections to the super important Medicis, and so Benvenuto was allowed to return to his hometown soon after. But he didn't stay for long in Florence. He traveled to Bologna, Lucca, Pisa to learn from the best of the best of the best. And all this time he kept playing instruments for his father's sake, but he absolutely hated it. So when he refused to continue to make music, it came to a fallout between Benvenuto and Giovanni, and Benvenuto then went to Rome, but once again he soon later returned to Florence, and he even started his musical career once more. He got into trouble so many times, mostly fist fights with colleagues, which forced him to flee Florence again, disguised as a monk this time. He once more went to Rome, and it was perfect timing, because Giulio de' Medici had just been made Pope. We know him as Pope Clement VII. Because of his connection, he was hired by many influential people, and at one point he was even applauded by Michelangelo Buonarroti, yes, the Michelangelo, for one of his sculptures, and that kind of inflated Benvenuto's ego even more. One day, his brother, who was a soldier in Rome, was shot to death, and Benvenuto took it upon himself to seek revenge by killing his brother's murderer, and the Pope practically punished him with a slap on the wrist. Soon after, he was even promoted by the Pope, and people were not happy about it. Benvenuto gained more and more enemies, and one time he did throw a stone at one of them, and he injured the man severely, so he had to flee again, this time to Neapel, and again he returned secretly to Rome, so his whole life was a whole lot of fighting and making trouble and running away and having friends in high places and returning and starting all over again. Yeah. He even wrote an autobiography, and in it he claims that in total he killed 3 people. The autobiography was even published in German by no other than Johann Wolfgang von Goethe himself, but the translation seems to take quite a few liberties. During his lifetime, Benvenuto was standing trial several times, most often though for homosexuality. So not for murder, not for fistfights. He was imprisoned for 2 years because he was suspected to have stolen papal gemstones. Later in life, he became a monk, but again, only for a while. He then married his housekeeper, had several children with her, and then he died in 1571 from peritonitis.
I think I dated him for 2 years in the late 90s. You could just imagine who this guy was, except mine wasn't that talented. But seriously, that is quite a life. And how fucked up is it that he brags about killing people, but was mostly arrested for being bisexual?
Yeah, it's...
Well, okay. Priorities.
So 2 times Benvenuto Cellini had been invited to the French court by King François I, and that's when he made the Saliera for him. And then, because I'm sure you're all wondering, well, how did it end up in Vienna?
I was.
In 1570, Elizabeth of Austria was married off to the French king Charles IX. And back in those days when royalty married, often one of the future spouses could not be there for the legal wedding. So a proxy was needed. And that was the case for the marriage of Elizabeth and Charles. The Archduke Ferdinand of Tyrol stood in as proxy for Elizabeth and therefore was gifted the Saliera by the French king. And that's how the valuable piece came into possession of the Habsburger. And that's ultimately how it ended up at the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna. And now we are finally getting into the heist. Or not the heist. You'll be the judge of that. But first, we need to take a quick break for a word by this week's sponsor, Payoff.
Payoff.com is a paying sponsor of this Fresh Hell podcast. You've tried balance transfers and budgeting, but high interest rates and unrelenting bill cycles make it almost impossible to get out of credit card debt on your own. Instead of another new savings technique, you need a clear path out of debt. And that's what a payoff loan can do. A payoff loan is a personal loan backed by member-centric credit unions designed to help you pay off your credit cards, with rates as low as 5.99% APR and loan amounts up to $35,000 with no hidden fees, and personal customer service support from Payoff to help you reach your financial goals. Some of the benefits of a payoff loan may also include potential credit score boost, 1 monthly payment, and savings from lower interest rates. Go to payoff.com/freshhellpodcast to learn more. Checking loan rates won't affect your credit score. Try something new. Pay off your credit card debt with Payoff. NMLS ID number 1396805. Not all applicants may qualify. Loans only available within the United States. Loan is not available in all states. Payoff works with lending partners who originate the loans. Additional terms, conditions, and eligibility requirements may apply. More information is available at payoff.com/freshhellpodcast.
All right, now this was a paid ad, and now we're on with our story. On the night of 10th of May 2003...
Oh, that's my birthday! Is it me? I feel like we always have coincidental dates in our episode. It could be me, because I have a lot of spooky fuckery about dates in my life, but yeah.
I really think it's just you, because it never happens to me.
I think it is me. There's a whole thing. I'll tell you about it later. It's weird. All right. Sorry.
So, on May 10th, 2003, your birthday, the Lange Nacht der Musik took place in Vienna. That's very similar to the Lange Nacht der Museen that I mentioned earlier, just for all things music. So, concert houses, music bars, operas, they all participate. But also places like the City Hall and apparently in 2003 the Kunsthistorische Museum. I tried to find a program for that day to see what event took place that night at the museum, but the internet didn't come up with anything useful. I just read that the last visitors had left the museum around 2 a.m. on the morning of 11th of May 2003. The facade of the building was being renovated at the time, and therefore there was some scaffolding going on. Around 3:55 a.m., the motion sensor of the first floor activates, but neither the floor light nor the cameras are activated. The 3 security guards think it is yet another false alarm, as it has happened in the past, so they cancel the alarm immediately, which means the police is not alarmed, which usually happens automatically if the alarm is not cancelled, in a certain amount of time. I think you all know how that works. I don't have to explain it to you.
Yes.
But the thing that happened was that the security guards also decide that they are not going up to check the floor in person.
Oh. They didn't. And just to be clear, so you said the first floor, but it's what we would call the second, right? So the ground floor and then one floor up. Yeah. No, that's fine.
I would forget. Yes.
It's only Americans, really, I think. So, you know.
You have to do everything differently from the rest of the world.
We really do. Okay. Well, it sounds like not investigating would be a problem. I feel like someone's going to get fired for that.
I think so too. 5 hours later, around 8:30 a.m., the cleaning crew discovers a smashed-in window and a broken display. The precious Saliera is gone. Finally, the police is informed. The investigation starts immediately, and it looks as if the thief or the thieves came up the scaffolding, smashed the window to get in, and then simply broke the display. All in all, according to the police, the whole thing couldn't have taken longer than 45 seconds. They determined that by the time that passed from the motion sensor going off to the time the alarm gets cancelled and the motion sensor gets armed again.
Oh, wow. Okay. I can't decide if this sounds like a common thief who got lucky or some very astute thief who planned it to a T. Usually you can tell, but so far this really feels like it could go either way.
Right?
Yeah. I'm curious.
Now the hunt for Cellini's masterpiece starts. A homepage is set up and the police and the museum place ciphered ads in the newspaper, addressing the thieves and asking them to contact the authorities or the museum, but nothing comes of it.
Sorry, did you say ciphered ads? Like code? Like when I text you with the migraine and I can't see right and you have to figure out what I meant, even though everything's been auto-corrected to something else? I know that's your favorite. All my friends love that.
I love it, yeah.
Code.
That's exactly what I mean. Coded ads and messages in the newspaper.
Well, they're assuming a level of sophistication there, aren't they?
I would love to know. I couldn't figure it out. Maybe I still can find something about it, what the ads said. I really would love to know.
Maybe we're imagining Zodiac, but really it was more like the Desperately Seeking Susan, like classifieds. Do you know what I mean?
Like ciphered. Got salt?
Yeah.
Or being salty? Stop being so salty.
You've been feeling extra salty. Yeah. We want to talk to you.
The FBI is helping out.
Oh.
Ransom demands are coming in and the police receives many tips, but none of them are leading anywhere. In 2004, the director of the Kunsthistorische Museum, Wilfried Seipel, who, by the way, wanted to resign, but the back then culture minister refused to accept the resignation.
Oh no.
So he gets contacted by somebody telling him he knows where the Saliera is, and a cat and mouse game ensues, and Seipel even travels to Italy to finally find the Saliera, but it's all a ruse. The informant is nothing more than a conman trying to get some money out of the whole thing. The Saliera stays missing, and it looks as if it's lost forever.
Oh, I feel badly for Seipel wanting to resign and then stuck on a wild goose chase. And how is this not a film starring George Clooney? Like,
right?
How has that not happened yet? This is fascinating.
So then, on 27th of October 2005, the police receives a package. In it, part of the Saliera, the removable golden trident that the male figure of Neptune is holding. Ransom text messages are received asking for 10 million euros, and if the ransom is not paid, the thief threatens to melt down the irreplaceable piece, and he even will video record it for us to enjoy.
No. Also, sorry, it just occurred to me that when this thing was stolen, they were sending out ciphered messages in the newspaper, and he just shot them a text. Like...
Yeah, okay, they didn't have his number.
That's fair.
But one thing, finally the police has a lead. They can trace back the mobile number that is used to send those demands, but of course, it's a prepaid phone.
Oh.
They are, however, able to trace it back to the store the prepaid card was sold, and they get the security tapes from the time the purchase was made. Bingo. They now have a photo of the man who is suspected to have stolen the Saliera.
Oh. I love it when this happens. Okay, so who was it?
Well, the photo is published, and wouldn't you know it, friends can identify the man. It's a 50-year-old security system expert named Robert Mang. And the next day, Mang turns himself in.
He probably had to, because all his friends were like, dude, I just called the police about you. So finally, he's like, fine, I'll go myself.
At first, Robert Mang only confesses to sending the messages, but that he had nothing to do with the art theft. He was just trying to get money out of the museum, but after a while he cracks and tells the police everything. He had been to the Kunsthistorische Museum before, and he had noticed some flaws in the security system.
Of course he would notice these things. He was an expert in security, right?
Exactly. And he stated that he had thought about how the system could be tricked, but according to him, that was all that was, just some mind games he played with himself. Which I get.
Sure. Yep.
Then, on that fateful May night, he had been out partying at the nearby Disco Titanic. It is situated in the Theobaldgasse, only 700 meters or 0.4 miles. So that's what, like a 7-minute walk, 8-minute walk, something like that.
I don't know how long it takes to walk places, but did you say Disco Titanic? Is it still there? Do I need to find my old vinyl pants?
Yes and yes.
Oh, we're going to the Titanic disco. Yes, I'm here for it. Paul will drive us.
So, Robert Mang had been drinking a little bit, 5 small beer and 3 tequilas to be exact, and on his way home he came past the Kunsthistorische Museum and he had the crazy idea to break in and take something. So he climbed up the scaffolding, he smashed in the window, and he was in. He knew that the security guards were nowhere near enough to catch him on time. He looked around and thought about what to take. A painting? No, too big and too unpractical to carry around. But then his eyes caught a simple display, no security system protecting the glass, and in it the Saliera. Well, that's compact enough to carry home easily, so he broke the display, took the Saliera and climbed out the window, down the scaffolding, and he was gone. He found a plastic bag and placed the Saliera in it to carry it home more easily.
Oh, no.
At home he wrapped it, put it in a suitcase and slid it under his bed before he went to sleep.
Oh, wow. I almost want to say good for him, because it really does seem like shockingly lax security. Also, climbing a scaffold seems terrifying to me.
Well, he said in an interview it wasn't that hard. It was more like a chicken ladder up.
Oh, so it was pretty. Yeah, and I guess if it was only a second floor, it wasn't too high. Oh, wow. It's like, I think we all have a friend like that where, have you ever been out with a friend that's had too much to drink and you just think, thank God I'm with this person? Because, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to climb this thing or I'm going to get in that car or, you know?
Yeah, I'm that friend.
Are you?
That's why I don't drink anymore.
That's all right. As long as I know, then I can keep an eyeball on you.
When Robert Mang woke up the next morning, he actually wanted to return the Saliera immediately, at least according to him. But when he opened the newspaper and saw the headlines stating that the piece of art was worth over 15 million euros, he panicked, understandably. He had no idea that this golden sculpture in the unprotected glass display was that valuable. For sure he would get a life sentence for this theft. So he stayed quiet and told nobody about what he had done. And after a while he took the Saliera, wrapped it up in bed sheets and in trash bags, and then he placed it in a metal box and sealed everything with silicone. He then drove to the countryside and buried his treasure.
No, this is some very Shawshank Redemption.
But how can you not think that something in the Kunsthistorische Museum is really valuable? I mean, not like 50 million, but even 2 million euros for a soul shaker would be like, damn, what did I do?
Yeah. Wow.
Fun fact. In 2004, Robert Mang had been interviewed by a radio station as a security system expert talking about how you can protect your homes. And in this interview, he even talks briefly about the Saliera and how he thinks that it must have been easy for the thief as the security system of the Kunsthistorische Museum was severely lacking, something the museum denied, by the way, and I'm not 100% sure who's in the right there.
Yeah, I don't know if I should be amused or angry about that.
I mean, it must have been lacking somehow.
Oh, it had, yeah.
At least the security guards were severely lacking.
Yes, yeah, agreed. Because if somebody had just gone up immediately, then they could have called the police immediately.
Now, if he wouldn't have felt the need to extort some money over 2.5 years later, the Saliera might have been never found again. But he did, and everything blew up.
Yeah, talk about regretting an impulsive move. I lie awake in bed at night rethinking, a thank you note I wrote to somebody 15 years ago. So I don't know how this guy slept for 2.5 years.
He said he felt really relieved once everything came to light, honestly. I can imagine that.
I fucking bet he did.
On 21st of January, he leads the police to the place where he had buried the Saliera, and it was returned to the Kunsthistorische Museum, where it was determined that it had been slightly damaged in some spots. According to the thief, though, he was only responsible for one of the scratches. All the other ones had been on the piece already, and the museum was only trying to blame it on him. But it looks as if most scratches came from the glass that hit the figure when the display was broken.
Oh, sure.
That's like with rental cars, right? That scratch was already there. Just trying to blame it on me.
Yeah, if you don't have that thing, in triplicate with the little marks that you've both agreed to were on there, you've got problems. Because someone's already curbed that car. You don't want to get dinged for it.
On 7th of September 2006, Robert Mang was sentenced to 4 years in prison for burglary and coercion, but the Supreme Court declared the sentencing void due to some legal errors in the trial. Robert Mang was then sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he was released on parole after 2 years and 9 months on 20th of October 2008. The Saliera was displayed at the Kunsthistorische Museum from 31st of January to 19th of February 2006. Then it was removed once more to be thoroughly restored, and the now world-famous condiment jar returned to its place in the museum on 14th of March 2006, and it is, of course, still on display there. Nowadays, you can even buy Saliera salt shakers in the museum shop. We'll post photos of it. They're expensive and very ugly.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty great, though. Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. And I usually get really angry at the criminals we cover, but this time I'm not so mad. I mean, what he did was wrong, there's no question about it, but nobody was hurt, nothing was lost forever. I think he should have had to pay for the damage he caused, but I think 2 years in prison is about right for a crime like that.
I'm pretty sure that he was also sentenced to pay for the damage.
And the restoration.
Yeah. Another thing that is interesting, the theft of the Saliera started an art project in Austria and Germany called Kunstklappe.
What's Kunstklappe?
Do you know the so-called baby klappe? Some hospitals have them. It's like a hatch where the moms can put babies in anonymously.
Yes.
So instead of just, putting them in a trash can somewhere, which unfortunately happens far too often, they have a safe place to put the baby.
Yeah, baby boxes is what we call them here, that let you surrender an infant. Usually, without a baby box, you have to interact with someone. Like, you have to hand it to another person at a firehouse or a hospital. But the baby boxes, you can do that without interacting, so you can stay anonymous. Not every state has them, I don't think, but I would have to look it up. But yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so the Kunstklappe was similar to that, just for art that had been stolen. It could be found in Vienna in the 6th district, actually not far from where Robert Mang used to have his business. And in the 2 years it existed, 40 stolen art pieces had been placed there. And in Germany it existed for 3 months and 5 art pieces had been returned that way.
Oh, that's amazing. How big was it, do you know? Because I'm imagining someone to, try to fold up a canvas and stuff it in a mailbox. It's like when you used to write, remember back in the day when you'd write your best friend a letter, and then you'd have, all these, thick pages of notebook paper that you'd be folding up and trying to cram it into an envelope.
What I read is it was like the size of a basement window.
Okay. Fair enough, yeah, good.
One last thing. In the 1950s... 3 replicas of the Saliera had been made by one of Vienna's most famous gold and silversmith companies, that is Jarosinske and Vaugois. They exist in Vienna since the beginning of the 19th century, when the family Vaugois came with Napoleon's troops to Vienna, and they simply decided to stay.
Okay, so the time period you talked about in the Theresia Candle episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, 3 copies were made. 1 copy was placed in the city hall where it was stolen by unknown thieves and never seen again. The 2nd copy was gifted to Queen Elizabeth II by Mayor Bruno Marek during her visit in 1969. And the 3rd copy stayed at the Jarosinske and Vaugois store for 5 decades. Shortly after the theft of the original, an unknown buyer contacted Mr. Vaugois, offering him to buy the copy. And it looks like on 29th of June 2003, Vaugois Sr. met with the buyer in his apartment, so in the Vaugois apartment, and sold the replica for 20,000 euros. At least that's what he told his wife the same day. The next day, on 30th of June 2003, Mr. Vaugois was found dead in his apartment. Apparently, he died under non-suspicious circumstances, but since that day, the Saliera replica as well as the 20,000 euros are gone. Poof. Disappeared.
Oh. Okay. I'm trying to figure out what was the date. You don't think there's any chance that he swapped it, do you? Like, do you think there's any chance that this just occurred to me, but do you think there's any chance that the stolen one, do the dates line up for the stolen one to have been swapped with the replica? And then he was killed because of it?
I don't think so. I think what happened was that because the original Saliera was stolen, it got world famous, and the replica was already in the store for 5 decades, so for 50 years, and people knew about it, and they thought, okay, we want to buy it because it's so famous and it's so pretty and we want it.
Right. Of course, yeah, that probably makes sense.
So, this was the story of the Cellini salt cellar and how it was stolen and how it came back. So, heist or not? I'd say no. I don't think this can be called a heist. What do you think, Annie?
I agree with you. I think this was a burglary. To be clear, I have no idea what the difference is between these things. Like, maybe it's value, like robbery versus grand theft, auto versus larceny versus... I don't know any of the technical terms, but I think of a heist as something that's just been really detailed and planned. Mm-hmm. It's Catherine Zeta-Jones in her little cat suit doing those Tai Chi moves with Sean Connery. This guy just got drunk and climbed a scaffold. Like... Yeah, it's just he lucked out that he got a Saliera and not a Hummel, if you watch Better Call Saul.
True, yeah, true. I agree. I think it was just... If everything went down the way he said it, then it was just like... he got lucky while being out on a drunken night in the town.
Yeah. He got really lucky. It could have been a lot worse. For sure. I enjoyed that very much. That was great. And I needed it. It's been kind of a tough couple of weeks during an extra tough couple of months, and what I think we can all agree has been an absolute shit show of a year. Yeah, so I've had migraines for most of the past 2 weeks. I just had to start a month of doxycycline, so I can't go out into the sun. I'm going to be living like a vampire for a while, and I'm extra queasy. It's great. So, yeah, something good. I'm going to do something lighter just to keep this episode light. I don't want to start crying again. My something good this week, I don't know if I've recommended it before, and if I have, it's been a while, so I'm going to recommend it again. It's not Schitt's Creek. It's Call the Midwife. Call the Midwife. If you haven't seen it, I think it's on Netflix. It's beautiful. It's brilliant. It makes me laugh and cry. It's really well done, beautifully filmed show, and... that's one of the few positive things I can recommend right now.
My something good this week is Vienna. I know I'm just about to move away from Vienna after living here since my 20th, which just the short break I took when I was living in Mexico. And I also said that I grew tired of the city. I was born a country mouse that always dreamed of living in the city when I was a teenager, and so I did, and it was great. And I think it's normal for many, including me, that once you get older, you seek more, peace and quiet and nature. But that doesn't mean I don't still love Vienna. It's a beautiful, beautiful city with rich history. So much you can see and experience and do. Museums, theaters, concerts, palaces, cathedrals, great food, great wine. You can visit the Prater and ride the big giant Ferris wheel, the Riesenrad, which is one of the city's landmarks. You can lie in the grass at the Burggarten, or you can rent a boat on the Alte Donau. You find morbid things like the museums I mentioned, or cemeteries. I love Vienna, I really do. I just don't want to live here anymore. I need friendlier faces, because it is the second rudest city in the world. Or the third, I think the second. And I need room to breathe. But if you have the chance to visit, please do so. You will definitely not regret it, I promise.
Well, you know that I'm going to be on my way to you just as soon as it's legal and safe again. And you know what? I understand that completely. And it'll be more like for you now, like when people visit us. We go into Boston and it's great. I lived and worked in Boston for years, and I hated it. Like you, I'm a country mouse, but I stayed a country mouse. I never really wanted to live in the city. I love to visit a city, but I don't want to live in one. Yeah. So, but when you visit, we'll go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which I haven't been to in years. I used to meet my dad there for lunch all the time when I worked for Mass Art. And of course, the Isabella Stewart is very famous for its art heist. And yeah, I love visiting Boston, especially when Paul's driving. But it's amazing how much more relaxing it is just to be 10 miles out, you know?
Exactly.
It's great. I'm excited for you. I'm super excited. I'm living vicariously and loving it.
All right, let's wrap it up, I'd say. thanks so much for listening. Please come say hi on Twitter and on Instagram.
Yeah, our website is www.freshhell.com. You can find all the different ways to contact us, leave us a voicemail, suggest cases.
And you'll find us on Facebook. We have a private Facebook group. Just search Fresh Hell Murder.
Yeah, it's a really nice group of weirdos. Come say hi.
Tell your dogs we said hi, and your cats too, and all the other pets.
All of them. Don't wake up a cat to tell them, though. You don't want to activate their murder mittens. They'll come for you. And until next week, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.